Hi, everybody, and welcome to this year's Positive Behavior Strategies training. My name is Ashley, and just as a reminder, this training meets the requirements for the NPA-NPS AB 1172. Once again, I'm Ashley Smith, and I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. I'm a behavior program director at an NPS, and I'm also a certified crisis prevention instructor. I give this training multiple times a year, and I actually just gave it to the school staff at this special education school that I work at. So let's jump right into it. What is on our agenda today? So real quick, we're going to do a little intro to AB 1172, factors that contribute to challenging behaviors, the ABCs of behavior, and how to identify the function, the use of data, proactive strategies, and the power of reinforcement, consequence-based strategies, and de-escalation techniques. And of course, if we have time at the end, I'm going to throw in some teaching strategies as well. So let's start with, what is AB 1172? It is an assembly bill that was passed after a fatal accident at an NPS and NPA years ago. The aim of this bill is to ensure any person working with California students that also is an employee at an NPS or NPA is trained in the use of positive behavior intervention supports. And this is mostly and most importantly for the need to avoid using any types of punishment or restraint on significant behavior. Here's a quote that I love to share at the beginning of my trainings. It's by good old B.F. Skinner, one of the founders and fathers of the science behind behavior change and human behavior. A person who has been punished is not thereby simply less inclined to behave in a given way. At best, they learn how to avoid punishment. So keep that in mind as we continue to go through this presentation. I'm going to skip this slide. You can read through it yourself, but for sake of time and to make this a little faster for you guys, let's get to the next one. So in the educational code, when speaking of behavioral interventions, and this is paraphrased, research and data shows that the education of individuals with disabilities can be made more effective by providing positive behavior intervention and supports to address the learning and behavioral needs of those individuals. So this is why we have such a thing as positive behavior interventions. And really, the cool thing is it's based on science and evidence and data collection over time. What some may see as a failure to behave properly is actually an inability to communicate properly. For those of you that are in the speech pathology world, you will appreciate that behavior is communication. Behavior is not just a way to make us as practitioners or teachers angry or to make our day harder. Behavior is our learners' way of communicating wants and needs and or communicating dislikes. So remember, I'm going to have this little elephant pop up from time to time, and it's going to remind us one key takeaway from this introduction is that behavior is communication. So when thinking about behavior is communication, what does that mean exactly? We need to consider contributing factors. There might be something going on underneath the surface that we can't see and that our students and learners can't communicate. Starting with illnesses, flus, lack of sleep, lack of nutrition. There might be abuse or neglect going on. They might have a medical diagnosis, or it might be a manifestation of their disability. In addition to ecological factors, we have to consider environmental factors. So we can't control the behavior of an individual and we can't force behaviors. What we can do is we can manipulate the environment. And by doing that, we can change what happens before the behavior and after the behavior so that we can reinforce appropriate behaviors for the future. So some environmental factors that we need to look at are Structure and predictability. Seating arrangement. It might be as simple as a change of switching somebody's seat up. Maybe an individual can't see what you're teaching them. Set clear expectations. Make sure that routines are consistent. Scheduling, time management, response effort. We're going to actually get into that a little bit later. You want to make sure that you have engaging curriculum and lessons. And then, of course, ensure opportunities to communicate. We want to be able to give our learners a voice in everything that they do and throughout their entire day. Real important factor is choice making opportunities. Are you giving them a chance to feel like they're in control? Noise level, the delivery of instruction, is it too fast, too slow, too monotone, too redundant? All right. Are there preferred staff? Are their peers giving them a hard time? So many different variables to consider in the environment. And this leads to our first subject matter in this presentation that really is based on the science of behavior. And this is that when dealing with behaviors, it is important to consider the function. What is the function of a behavior? There are 4 of them. And I have this little visual as a reminder of the acronym SEAT, starting with S. S-E-A-T. S stands for sensory stimulation. Escape avoidance. A stands for attention-seeking behaviors. And the T is tangibles, but it's not tangible as the function. It's access to tangible items. So these are the 4 main reasons why a learner engages in inappropriate or disruptive behaviors that may interrupt the learning environment of themselves and of those around them. Sensory stimulation. There's going to be another little technical definition that pops up for those of you that are in the world of applied behavior analysis. It's good to know what the reinforcer is when dealing with a function of behavior. So sensory stimulation is also known as automatic reinforcement, which means we can't intervene in this. This happens because it feels good to the individual, and it's not always something that we might see as typical. Escape and avoidance. This is pretty self-explanatory, and this has to do with negative reinforcement. So the behavior occurs in order to escape or avoid a non-preferred activity. It could be a non-preferred person, a non-preferred location. So keep that in mind as we continue. And then, of course, we know this all too well, attention-seeking behaviors. A lot of our learners are desperate for attention. And this comes in the form of social mediation. And then last but not least, tangibles, access to tangibles. So our learners and our students do things to get access to tangible items or locations or activities. Can it be more than one function at a time? The answer is yes. It can be multiple functions, and that's what can make it so tricky. Why do we need to detect the function of a behavior? Well, it helps us to identify what is called in the behavior world a contingency, or a causal relationship between the antecedent and the behavior. So we want to keep in mind that behaviors occur due to the environmental variables surrounding it. This means behaviors occur because they have been reinforced in the past. We need to find a pattern of what happens before the behavior, and we need to see what the history is of what happens after the behavior so that we can learn how to effectively and functionally change that behavior. So here we go. The ABCs of behavior, also known as the 3-term contingency. Contingency, remember from the previous slide, is a causal relationship, starting with antecedent. Antecedent, the event that occurs immediately before the behavior. Here are some examples. It might be a task that's given. It might be transitioning from one location to another. It might be that your attention as the practitioner or teacher was directed at a different student. It might be that you denied access to an item or a location. The environment might be noisy, or the structured activity might actually lack structure and the learner might be bored. So let's do a little exercise. We're going to find the antecedent in the following scenario. A learner walks to the speech room for a session. The SLP greets the learner and the learner reciprocates the greeting. The SLP then proceeds to pick up her assessment sheets and place them on the table. The learner swipes the papers off the table and runs out of the room. So as you can see, I broke this up into 4 different steps in sequential order. So take a minute and think, which number or what step is the antecedent in the following scenario? Let's find out. If you chose number 3, the SLP then proceeds to pick up her assessment sheets and place them on the table, then you are correct. This is the proper antecedent out of that following scenario that I gave you. With that said, when thinking about antecedents or what might happen before the behavior, we need to consider antecedent-based interventions. This is also known as proactive strategies, and this needs to be implemented prior to the behavior occurring. So this can be changes in the physical setting, curriculum, or schedule. It could be changes in staff, changes in the way that work is presented, modifications in the color and the size of the fonts. But just remember that this is a proactive strategy, and antecedent interventions are most effective when based on the identified function of the problem behavior, which is what we talked about a little bit earlier. Couple ideas and examples of some antecedent strategies. Priming. You want to build rapport, non-contingent reinforcement, establish motivation, visual schedule, and I'm going to give you guys another few seconds to read through the rest of the bullet points. Here's an example of using choices as an antecedent or proactive strategies. Remember earlier when I said, does the learner have a sense of control? Do they have an opportunity to communicate? Well, this gives them both. They have a sense of control and they have an opportunity to communicate. How can this be provided to them? It can be a verbal cue, it can be a visual cue, but you need to make sure that the cue is consistent initially when you're teaching them how to make a choice. So for example, in this situation, we might use the cue, what do you want? And we're not going to give them the answer. We're going to give them the choices, either verbal choices or picture choices. And of course, if I had time, I would do a whole other training on effective teaching strategies on how to teach choice making, and I'm sure many of you already know how to do that as well, but this is for the sake of proactive behavior strategies. We want to make sure that we're offering choices. Also, if in a situation you have an individual that is resistant to work, let's say the function of their behavior is escape or avoidant, you want to give them a choice, and it's going to be something that you want them to do, but you're going to offer them a sense of control and a way to do it. So before letting them escape, you say, hey, what do you need? What do you want? And then you prompt for the learner to say, I want. They can either choose work or break. If they choose work, then they should have a reward. There should be something that they buy into. If they choose break, that in itself is reinforcing because they get to escape and avoid the task for a little bit of time. We also can talk about non-contingent reinforcement. Feel free to look this up on your own. And if you want, I can provide links to give more information on this topic. Here's a quick example of non-contingent reinforcement. And again, it is best used when used according to the function of the behavior. Here are some more proactive strategies. It's really effective, especially with your learners that have verbal communication skills. Even if they don't, if they're using an AT device, it is really effective to do a feelings check. I like to start with the 5-point scale. If this is a skill that a learner is acquiring, then I don't like to give too many options up front. However, this is something that you can always build on. So when you give an opportunity for a learner or a student to identify how they're feeling, you're giving them an opportunity to communicate. So they can look at a visual and decide, I feel happy, calm, frustrated, upset, or angry. If they happen to choose 3, 4, or 5, then there is a built-in natural opportunity for them to also engage in coping strategies. This is extremely effective when providing proactive behavior support. Before you present a task, if you want to present a task when a learner has already identified that they're upset, that is not going to go your way. It is more effective and you will get better use of your instructional time if you have the learner identify their feeling and then engage in a coping strategy. This might take an extra 5 minutes, but it could save you an entire 30-minute session of them inappropriately escaping. More proactive strategies. Establish motivation. I'm sure most of you have used token economies in the past. This isn't to be used as bribery. This is to be used to teach students that first they engage in the non-preferred task or activity, and then they get something rewarding for it. That works out all across the board for us as well. We're not going to go to work if we don't get paid. So this is something that is highly debatable. However, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that token economies are very effective with proactive behavior strategies and maintaining appropriate behaviors. Again, remember, here's our little elephant. Antecedent strategies, or also known as proactive strategies, need to be implemented according to the function of the behavior. One more time, here is the function of behavior. SEAT, sensory stimulation. E stands for escape avoidance. A stands for attention seeking. And last but not least, access to tangibles.